Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to our celebration of NNSA's 10th anniversary. I'm Clarence Bishop, the director of NNSA's Congressional, Intergovernmental, and Public Affairs Office, and it is my pleasure to serve as the Master of Ceremonies today. First of all, wasn't that some slideshow? Particularly, sure. For those of you who were able to see yourselves 5-10 years ago, it must be very, very interesting. I'll leave it at that. But thank you for joining us as we celebrate our theme, honoring our past and securing our future. Honoring our past and securing our future. The theme, by the way, adopted by your vote, the NNSA workforce. We'd also like to welcome all of our colleagues from across the enterprise. This program is being broadcast to NNSA's facilities across the country. To get us started, I'd like to bring to the podium Bishop Willie Bruce, Jr., pastor of Word Healing Ministries, for our invocation. Bishop Bruce.
Good afternoon. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, Almighty and eternal God, we come to you in this prayer today to thank you and to invite you into our midst. Let us always be mindful that the milestones we celebrate today could never have been achieved without your direction and support throughout the last 10 years. True to your word, you never left or forsake us, even in the most challenging times in the life of this Nuclear Security Administration. With skillful and godly wisdom, you have empowered as leaders and divinely directed the men and women who navigate the choppy seas of nuclear security toward the noble shore of sustainable world peace. And it is with you at the helm that we attentively seek to continue to do what is right in your sight. So great is your faithfulness in all and to all. We welcome you to this celebration today, Lord. We invite you to take charge of the proceedings. We pray that you will feel honored and comfortable in our midst as you lead, rule, and abide in all that we do. Let your blessings fall upon us, Father, and grant the power that is necessary to allow this administration to fulfill this crucial role without obstacle, fanfare, or hesitation for years to come. We also give thanks for this land and the leaders you have given to us. Let your protective light continue to shine upon the idea of liberty for all and one nation under God that it embraces. We ask this in your precious name, believing that it is already done. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop Bruce. Would you now please stand for the presentation of the colors, followed by our national anthem. Please be seated. I want to thank you, Bishop Bruce, for opening our ceremonies today, and many thanks to our honor guard and America's fighting men and women around the world protecting us today. Now I'd like to bring up Administrator Thomas DiAgostino to introduce our first speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good afternoon. First, I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you that are joining us here today to take part in this special ceremony, including those folks out at the site offices, at our laboratories and production plants, as well as our laboratory directors and plant managers that are here in the audience. As you know, this is a very important, very special day for the NNSA and for the department as we mark our 10th anniversary. Not only do I have the pleasure, of course, of participating today in this afternoon's meeting and all-hands meeting and event later on today, but I also have the honor and privilege of introducing two people, and as the saying goes, who need no introduction, of course, and that's our Deputy Secretary, the Honorable Dan Poneman, who's our Chief Operating Officer, who's running the department for the Secretary, Secretary Stephen Chu. We're extremely fortunate to have Dan Poneman as our Deputy Secretary of Energy. He's well known and well respected in the national security community. And as I am learning about this business, and I learn every day, in the international security community, I would say, I would be hard-pressed to run into anybody that hasn't worked with Dan in some form or fashion, both nationally and internationally. He's very well known. I've had the privilege of working with Dan for this past year and a half. On a wide variety of nuclear security topics. The work that we've done on the nuclear posture review, for example, the New START Treaty, here with Ms. Tauscher, and I believe Rose Gottmuller's out there in the audience somewhere, who worked so hard on the New START Treaty. But the input the department provided was very important to the State Department, and Dan was a key element of providing that perspective. The Nuclear Security Summit, first ever, 47 nations, heads of state, coming to Washington, D.C. to discuss the all-important topic of securing our nuclear materials worldwide and how we're going to go do that. Dan was a key element of the department's input into that. It's hard to imagine what we would have provided without that type of expertise that Dan provides. And of course, with his relationships with the Russians, with Rosatom, the Ministry of Defense, and our work out into the future in securing material, but also, importantly, working on energy security, which is an important mission of the department. As I mentioned, Dan brings so much more than his wealth of knowledge and understanding in this. He brings his deep connections with people around the world in nuclear security. He brings a deep personal commitment and desire to make the world a safer place, and the determination and the energy. You need both of those, determination and energy, to make a difference and make it happen. Dan, on behalf of the NNSA, we'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. We know you have an extremely busy schedule. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Dan Poneman. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I did not know before I got here today the slogan that had been selected, but I cannot think of a better one than honoring our past and securing our future. And when I think of honoring our past, the first thing I have to say on behalf of the Secretary, from whom you'll be hearing presently, and myself, is thank you. You kept us safe throughout the Cold War, and when you think of the campaign banners, and I did think of it when we had the colors go by, Sicily 43, the East Indies 42. Many of us, I know I did, had family members who shed blood, who died in Anzio and places far afield. And because of the incredible work done by the people, first of the Atomic Energy Commission and now of the National Nuclear Security Administration, we came through safe and we prevailed. So I want to say first and foremost to everyone out there and the people you represent in your home organizations and your parents and siblings and people who supported you, thank you. I also want to acknowledge the incredible array of distinguished Americans who are joining us up here today. Clarence, thank you for teeing us up so well. And I think it represents very, very well one of the reasons why we prevailed in the efforts that we have had to date and why we will prevail in the future. No policy in the nuclear security area can succeed, can survive, if it does not have broad and deep support. We will have presidents of both parties. We'll have Congress pass control from one side to the other. But the American values endure, American interests endure, and the safety provided to this nation and to our friends and allies around the world will continue to be protected by the skill, patriotism, dedication, and hard work of the people who are arrayed around me. So I want to individually acknowledge Congressman Thornberry, for whom, among other things, I had to thank for introducing me many, many years ago to a very young Clay Sell, one of my predecessors, and who has, in his own right as a specialist and very early, I think, in his own congressional career, was traveling to this, I think it may have still been the Soviet Union. I can't remember exactly which the first year was. And then on my left, one of my former bosses, the first administrator, retired General John Gordon, Linton Brooks, and my now dear friend, somebody I used to just honor as somebody I used to watch miraculously do things on Capitol Hill and now does miraculously things with our Russian counterparts, Undersecretary Ellen Tauscher. And I think what you'll note up here is we've got people of both parties. You've got people of both branches of government, the executive branch and the legislative branch. And it's been a real pleasure and a delight to work with Tom D'Agostino, who I think really embodies all of these best traditions. We do respect the past. We honor that tremendous history, but the future is just as exciting. And I think that the future that was sketched by President Obama in Prague a year ago, last April, set forth a vision of this country's nuclear future and how we sit in the world and how we see our common interests going into the future. He articulated a vision, ultimately, of a world free of nuclear weapons, but in the meantime, understanding that so long as we have those weapons, we must keep them safe, secure, and effective. And I see we have here Dr. Tom Hunter and Mike Anastasio. I don't know if George is here as well, but the tremendous work that has been done in terms of the resources needed to keep the stockpile safe, secure, and effective, using those resources wisely, the tremendous support we've had from the President, from the Vice President, from Secretary Gates, and others has been really gratifying, and I think promises that the future will be as bright as the past has been. But I think one of the interesting and perhaps unsung tales of the NNSA and its role in the Department of Energy, because one of the things Secretary Chu has been very passionate and articulate about is we are indeed one department. And NNSA, while it has its unique attributes and its unique missions, it is deeply informed by and in turn informs other parts of the department, the science, the energy issues as well, are many of these issues that depend on excellence in management. And we've seen that it works when we try to take steps to ensure that we have got smart contracting relationships between our site offices and the contractors, such as the Kansas City plant, where there have been tremendous progress made to the point where you don't have to take my word for it. They have won the Malcolm Baldrige Award for Management Excellence, which is the highest such award that is given in the country. That is a big deal, and it's something that we can all learn from. Supply chain management, another thing that they have pioneered, saving tens of millions of dollars to the taxpayer through intelligent procurement practices, and much beside. That is to say that even though the past is a glorious one, even though we're heading into a future where, driven by the President's vision of a world free of nuclear weapons, we're taking intelligent steps in the meantime to lock down nuclear materials through steps such as the Nuclear Security Summit, to enlist the cooperation of nations around the world, of international organizations around the world, to help us keep the world safe, to get the loose nuclear materials that still reside inadequately protected, to fight nuclear terrorism wherever we may find it, to support efforts around the world under Resolution 1540, to make sure that the tools are in hand to minimize the threat that nuclear weapons will fall into the wrong hands. The work continues. It must continue in the nuclear security sphere specifically. It must continue as we see a new era in which nuclear energy once again looks to play an increasingly important role in building a low-carbon future. We must make sure, as we move into that future, even as we pursue the energy pathway of nuclear energy, that at the very same time we make sure that the nuclear materials that come out of that process, either at the front end through the uranium enrichment process or out of the back end through plutonium separation, that we are constantly monitoring the risks, that we're taking intelligent actions to ensure the technology paths that will minimize those risks, and with the continued effort, patriotism, skill, and dedication of the people in this room, and I have so many friends I see in the audience, I couldn't possibly begin to name them without leaving out several and blundering into some embarrassment. I've just got to say, there's no more exciting time to work in the department under this president and under this secretary, and I will conclude where I began by thanking you all for making it possible. Thank you.
I'll introduce the secretary, and as I said earlier, this is a man that needs no introduction. You've probably all read his bio or heard about him. I can say it's all true, and really somebody I've really enjoyed working with, and it's a real privilege for me to work with the secretary and having an opportunity to work for somebody that's won a Nobel Prize is something that is, I wouldn't have imagined that in my wildest dreams. You know, what's that like? What questions does he ask you? People say. I said, you don't want to know. I don't always have the answers, but the secretary is kind and gracious and lets me go find out. I come back. But I've had the opportunity to work with the secretary for since day one, actually. In fact, the secretary was kind enough to let me introduce him at his very first meeting, all-hands meeting, with the department the first day of the administration. And it was a real privilege to do that, and it's a privilege to do so today. I've seen him work with the President and the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State on issues that are very near and important to the mission of the NNSA. I saw firsthand how committed he was to making sure that we had the resources and the direction and the guidance needed to lay out that path, that very well-defined path on making things happen. In fact, our success in our 2011 program and budget that was submitted in early February to Congress was largely due as a result of the Secretary's direct involvement. I thank you, sir, for that. When President Obama nominated the Secretary, he said the future of our economy and national security is inextricably linked to one challenge, and that challenge is energy. Nobody understands this better than Secretary Chu. We've all heard of the word to innovate, or innovate, and innovate really means to make new. And the Secretary is taking a fresh look at the department. He's making a new Department of Energy. He's doing this through revitalizing the sense and purpose and pursuit of scientific innovation and discovery that really is at the core of everything we do in the NNSA, everything we do in our applied energy programs, and everything we do in our science programs. He's also doing this through defining a new clean energy future. And as you heard the Deputy Secretary describe, he's doing this through innovating the way we do business through a set of management reform activities. And with that, it is my great honor and privilege to introduce you, our nation's energy innovator, Dr. Stephen Chu. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tom. That was exceedingly generous, probably mostly untrue, but heck. But thank you very much. It's very flattering. And thank you, Dan, for your remarks to the group. I have a bunch of distinguished people. I have to let you know that when the NSA was first formed, the wisdom of the people who helped form it decided they wanted to make an advisory committee. This was when General Gordon was first asked to head up the NSA, and actually I was on the advisory committee since day one, so hello, General Gordon. And then when the general stepped down and Ambassador Brooks took over, you put up with us for a little while. Thank you. Feisty bunch of people. So hello again, and I thank you both for your service to the NSA. I got to know Representative now Undersecretary Tauscher when I became head of the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. She was a very good steward of Livermore, Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, and occasionally I said, couldn't we just draw the districts a little bit over? And but she was such a good supporter of Lawrence Livermore Laboratory that I said, boy, we needed you for us too. So I was trying to get adopted. But well, they didn't. They don't do gerrymandering for scientific reasons. Thank you, Clarence, for being the master of ceremonies, and to Representative Thornberry for your leadership in getting this agency started. Well, of course, it wasn't really started 10 years ago. It was started in earnest, I would say, even pre-World War II. I mean, the little outpost at Berkeley Lab, at Brookhaven, I know there were some. I'm just going down. I'm trying to mentally tick down the line, but there are a couple of places. But certainly, it really began in earnest during World War II and the Manhattan Project. And so the NSA has those very deep roots. And from those very deep roots in the Manhattan Project and the labs before, the great scientific reputation of the Department of Energy grew out of that. And so it's something that the nation can look back on. When I brag about the Department of Energy and how it supported the work of more Nobel laureates than any other funding agency in the world, its roots actually came out of the precursor to the NSA, the Department of Energy, and the Manhattan Project. And so I think all of you should be very, very proud of that. Even though you're officially only 10 years old, you're 60 years old, as you well know, or 70 years old. I think if I look at the accomplishments only in the last 10 years and look at the things that have been done, the first thing that pops to mind is the extraordinary pioneering work that you did in developing a new generation of high-performance supercomputers in collaboration with commercial vendors. But those supercomputers are now, and the design of those type of supercomputers are now leading the world. I look at other things. I look at the Z machine. I look at DART. I look at NIF. I look at the Mesa Microsystems, the Center for Integrated Nanotechnologies, the highly enriched uranium, the Fort Knox's. These are things that have only happened in the last 10 years. It's a remarkable record. In those first years in the formation of the NSA, I remember, especially after 9/11, I would take these night flights because I was a professor and I had to teach my classes, and I would come in. And after 9/11, I remember saying with our advisory committee to the NSA how important it was to lock down the loose nuclear material. This is 2001, and 2002. And the NSA has led the charge there. We now have a plan that President Obama is leading charge on to say we'll have 4 years that we can lock down all this nuclear material. And it's really heartening from those early days in 2000, 2001 to see, again, the NSA leading the charge in this and to help first the former Soviet Union to return all those materials. The NSA's role in the nuclear propulsion fleet and what it has been doing, again, since the days of Nautilus. Incredible. The critical role today, there are several fold. First, the main mission, of course, is the stockpile stewardship. But that stockpiled stewardship in a time where we're no longer going to be doing testing requires even more renewed scientific talent and investment. And I was very pleased to see the Department of Defense, the NSC, the Denny Blair's organization, all of these uniformly saying how important it was to make deeper investments in the NSA for that the intellectual horsepower can't be taken for granted and that you really have to make these investments going forward. And it was very heartening. Secretary Gates was, in fact, you were very kind about that, but actually all I had to do is convince Secretary Gates, and I had just stood there and he said how important it was. It was great. And he didn't really have to be convinced, quite frankly. He knew how important the mission was. And but in addition to the stockpile stewardship and the intellectual talent and the infrastructure we need in order to keep that going forward, there are other new roles. The most important new role is the non-proliferation aspects, both securing the material, developing the technologies that can help us better detect, track, and figure out what's really going on, to know when an aluminum tube is an aluminum tube and not something else. All of these things, the NSA has a very proud history, and we are tapped as the technical experts in these areas. And this is partly why all those three-letter agencies have so much faith in us, that we are the technical experts. In the nuclear posture review, the NNSA played a very intimate role in the shaping of that nuclear posture review and the conclusions. I think Tom played an incredibly important role, as did Dan Poneman, as did many of the people in the NSA, and so they did an incredible job. In terms of the Nuclear Security Summit, which had over 40 heads of state in the United States that Obama chaired and led during that whole time. He didn't just come in at the beginning, come in at the end. He was there the entire time. And to get 45 plus countries, I'm not sure the exact number, to say nuclear security, even though the Cold War era, where we had tens of thousands of nuclear warheads of both Soviet Union and the United States pointing at each other, those days are mercifully over, but even still today there is an incredible threat, especially the threats of terrorists getting hold of materials that they can fashion into either to a dirty bomb or a bomb that actually explodes. This is something that is very, very serious. To get all those countries to recognize this, and even as the world begins to look towards civilian nuclear power as an energy security option for countries, and also for in terms of the carbon dioxide emissions, we also have to develop this very safely. And so the NSA is playing a very important role in conjunction with the nuclear energy part of the Department of Energy to make sure that we grow these new industries in a very safe way. Now, the budgets, you all know the numbers. I'm not going to talk about that. I just think it reflects very well on the NSA, the President's budget for FY11, this increase of 9.8% to invest in the nuclear security enterprise. When I became head of the department, I looked at what the NSA budgets were doing, and the science and technology budget, the overall fraction of the budget that went to science and technology, which I regard as the heart of and the core of strengths of the NSA, have been declining, and it was on a 10-year path. It was in the 8th year of a 10-year path that would have halved the budget, the relative budget. And I said, no, this has to stop. You're just giving it away. Because you cannot build back that resource in a few years. So once you lose it, it will take decades to grow back. And I was so happy and started talking with the other agencies that would benefit from this. They said, absolutely right. The non-proliferation budget also, and the naval reactors budget. So I think this is, in summary, I've talked way too long. I was supposed to give Tom 5 of my minutes. But I just wanted, again, to echo the words, what Dan said. This is actually about you, all the people in the NSA, and your service, not only in the last 10 years, but your service over the decades. How important it is, how important it will be going into the future. The fact that other agencies are now looking to the NSA labs for more guidance on many other things outside what formerly was the mission. It speaks so well of the NSA, whether it's from microelectronics or very clever ways of doing this, that, and the other thing to quite frankly, things like that would have direct bearing on our energy future and our industrial competitiveness. Again, the strengths of the NSA are all going to be used, and so thank you all very much for what you've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm going to take some license here since I'm at the podium and I have the microphone. And all of you who scripted this program out are now taking a really deep breath. What's he going to do? I'm going to juggle the program around just a bit because, seriously, Congressman Thornberry is here with us. He is sitting here literally in jeopardy of, if not, in fact, missing votes on the Hill. And so we're going to have him speak to us next. Congressman Mac Thornberry has represented the district that includes Pantex for 15 years. He was one of the principal authors of the NNSA Organization Act and chaired the Armed Services Committee's Special Oversight Panel on NNSA. He has a keen interest in NNSA, and we are better for it. Congressman Thornberry, please.
Well, let me say first to three people I admire very much, thank you for letting me cut. Votes have started, and so I will need to leave in just a second to go make them. I suspect that is part of the job that Ellen does not miss very much, even though there are lots of people on both sides of the aisle who miss her, even in your new capacity. I hope I don't sound too much like an old fogey, but it's hard for me to believe it's been 10 years since this happened. Sometimes when my kids have birthdays, we tell them the story about the wild ride to the hospital on the night they were born. I thought I would tell y'all a little about the wild ride to the hospital when NNSA was born. In my first year in Congress, beginning in 1995, as I got more familiar with the work that went on at Pantex and throughout the nuclear weapons complex, it became clear that there were some management issues that had not been resolved. It only makes sense you go from 18 sites down to 8 sites, which is what essentially happened at the end of the Cold War, and that there would be problems develop. The one that really sent me over the edge is when the folks at Pantex let me know that they were ordered not to have any communication with Washington unless it had gotten approved ahead of time by some of the regional offices. I thought, that's not a good situation to be in for your nuclear weapons complex. So, as a freshman member of the House Armed Services Committee, working with a young legislative assistant named Clay Sell, who came to be Secretary Poneman's one of his predecessors, we put in a provision in the defense bill that said each site in the nuclear weapons complex reports directly to the Assistant Secretary in the Department of Energy, to try to have a clear line of command, a clear line of accountability. And it kind of stayed under the radar screen and actually got signed into law by President Clinton. But remember, I was a freshman, and I made a freshman mistake. And my freshman mistake was I tried to do something with the management of the nuclear weapons complex without coordinating with Senator Domenici. So the defense bill gets signed into law, and about 2 to 3 months later, the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill gets signed into law, and lo and behold, it repeals the provision that I just put in. So we learned a lesson from doing that. So 3 years go along. There continues to be questions about the management of the complex, the difficulty involved in that. including a number of security issues. President Clinton asked his Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, chaired by Warren Rudman, to look into the situation. 3 months later, they come back with a report that says this is a dysfunctional bureaucracy incapable of reforming itself. That helped give us a little political momentum. It turns out Senator Domenici had been concerned about management of this all along, but wanted to do it in a broader way rather than just my little fix. And so, working with Senator Domenici on the Senate side, but gentlelady from California on the other side of the aisle in the House, we were able to put in the defense authorization bill in 1999 one of the options that the PIFIAB had suggested. And they suggested one of two things. One is you make it a semi-autonomous entity within the Department of Energy, or you take it out completely and return it to a completely autonomous agency. One of the two options. We chose the more modest course, and it got put into the bill that way. Not to say that that was easy. I remember a particularly tense meeting in Speaker Denny Hastert's office, just among Republicans, where folks who represent other committees that thought they had some jurisdiction decided they didn't like this at all. And after the screaming and the pounding and all of that took place, finally Speaker Hastert decided, I'm not sure he's very happy about it, to go ahead and let the defense bill come to the floor with the NNSA language intact. But of course, then we faced the Democrats, and John Dingell didn't like it very much, so he had a motion on the floor as we considered this conference report to strip NNSA out. And we had to have the debate and the vote even there. Passes the Senate. You think you're out of danger. But then Secretary Richardson, who never liked it at all, decided that President Clinton ought to veto the bill over that section. And fortunately, we were able to get through that hurdle as well. So on October 5th, 1999, the NNSA was signed into law as part of the Defense Authorization Bill to take effect March 1st, 2000. Unusually, House Armed Services Chairman Floyd Spence decided that Congress was not just going to pass a law and walk away from it, but that we were actually going to follow the implementation of the law. And so Ellen and I got a chance to work together day after day with John Gordon as this new entity was being stood up to see whether we wrote the law very well and how it was implemented. So how's it gone these past 10 years? I got to confess, more than once, I think we chose the wrong path. I think often that we should have made it a completely autonomous agency because the tentacles of the Department of Energy reaching in, trying to take some of the money to have exercise some of the oversight keeps coming around. It's an issue that's come up in a variety of ways over the last 10 years. I'm not sure we got that right. I think a lot of things were done right, some of which we'll never know. And as I think back to the work that Ambassador Brooks, Kim Baker, and others have done in the non-proliferation area, we will never know what catastrophes did not happen because of the work that they have done to secure Russian materials and work all around the world. Like defense programs and naval reactors, all of those things started before the NNSA. Part of our goal was just don't mess it up. And if possible, even enhance it and make it better. I am very encouraged at the increased attention that NNSA is getting from this administration. It's about time. Increase attention from the Department of Defense and the administration in general, increase funding, which helps Tom's job be a lot easier. I think that is encouraging. What matters most, of course, is people. I think that NNSA has been very fortunate to have had 3 outstanding directors over the course of its history. They have helped weather through a whole variety of storms and do it well. But with all due respect, if I may say so, even more important has been the people at the sites, at the labs, at the plants, at the test sites, at the DOE offices, who with all this bureaucratic shuffling around, with all the ups and downs of budgets, with all the changing of political winds, have continued to do the impossible day after day. And it is to them, I think, that the credit belongs, and certainly to them, they have my, and I know our, thanks. Thank you.
General John Gordon has enjoyed a distinguished career in the Air Force. Among many assignments, he commanded a peacekeeper ICBM wing and was deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Later, he served as a key advisor to President Bush on Homeland Security. In between, he was chosen to organize NNSA. Please join me in welcoming the first NNSA administrator, General John Gordon.
Two things before I start. One, Secretary used about half my material. Mac used about half. We got a half-life problem going on here. There may not be much left. And secondly, I just thinking about what Mac was just talking about. Think about my first meeting with Secretary Richardson under those conditions. There had been a search team put together that decided I should be the guy. So we gave Secretary Richardson an organization. We gave him an administrator. So it was an interesting first couple of days. I do want to really, though, thank all of you for being here today. Thank Tom. It's great to be here with Tom, but to be with really the creative force that created NNSA. We've already heard a little bit about the people that were truly the creative, the fathers, the mothers, the creative force behind NNSA. It was Mac Thornberry and Ellen Tauscher, Senator Pete Domenici. But as I look around here, there's so many of you as well, people that were here on the first day. Look at Mike Kane and Bill Barker and you know, I'm going to get in trouble immediately when we start saying names, but Rose in the first day. And what we did, we went back to that and how hard we went back and how far that was. We truly were a creation of Congress. It came about after, as Mac was talking about, a period of drift following the Cold War and lack of political support for funding for the stockpile and indeed for the entire enterprise. The catalyst seemed to be an espionage issue and some losses, potential losses in classified data at one of the laboratories. But there was much more to the creation to NNSA than securing classified information. Some critics held that the program was badly managed by a top-heavy bureaucracy that wasn't effective or adequately responsive to national security needs. Some felt that the budget didn't come close to meeting national security needs and saw the enterprise in steady decay. Some saw the budget as overly flush, and these were just the more tempered criticisms. So Congress created this semi-autonomous, separately created agency within the department. And this prospective parent of the utility of the new entity was not all that thrilled about the idea, but they created the department, the administration, stood it up, and I became the first administrator in June 2000. We started in a small suite on the B corridor and tried to begin organizing the agency. The challenge, of course, was this was already an operating organization with a critical national security mission that couldn't pause while we arranged some boxes on an org chart or sorted out some policies. I compared the job a bit to changing the engines on a jet airplane while it's flying, but we looked around and decided there was also a national election coming at us. So it was not only changing the engines on the jet while it was flying, but it seemed to be during a shift change of air traffic control. But, Tom, you may find a familiar ring to some of this. Yes. But we went to work. The fires at Los Alamos were still smoldering, and I was afraid my first task was going to have to be to sue the Secretary of Interior for trying to burn down my laboratory. But actually, the first real task I undertook was to abolish and reverse some new knee-jerk security rules that literally made it impossible to do work in the weapons design shop at Los Alamos. But while we were working on the organization, on management and security, we took on some other issues as well, including the sorry state of our infrastructure. Some of you will remember the building at Y-12 where we had to wear hard hats when we went in because the pieces of the ceiling kept falling off. Others of you will remember an ugly tour we took Spence Abraham on into CMR, down into the bowels. So we established the Facilities and Operations Office and began this somewhat laborious task of prioritizing the building scheduled for renovation and demolition. And with the help of Congress, we started to whittle away at this. One of my more memorable moments was actually driving a dozer, a front loader, through an abandoned guard shack at Y-12 that I'd actually been in 20 or 30 years before, had been abandoned in place 15 years ago. And the principal purpose was just to show that we can get something started. There's another set of stories we can talk about sometime that talk about what it was to get the safety authorization for a bureaucrat in Washington to drive a front loader on a plant. Or talking to the unions about taking the job away for a couple of minutes. But Congress was supportive, and we really saw some first increases in budget at that time frame, mostly going toward the infrastructure. And I think it was in part because we showed Senator Domenici and Mac Thornberry this one photo that in fact, they got tired of looking at it. We'd take one of their key customers, our key customers, Admiral Rich Meese from Strategic Command, out on a tour, and we had him up on the roof of a gravel gurney, and we're looking at the weeds that were growing on the roof, some of them nearly 3 feet tall, on the top of a nuclear weapons production facility. So that seemed to help a little bit and get going. What we didn't do and didn't have to take on when we started NNSA was a problem with naval reactors. It was running superbly. The non-proliferation programs were running well, and in the weapons programs, the technical work was still superb. The value and correctness of the stockpile stewardship program has since been proven. These scientific tools have carried us in entirely new paradigms in surety, in certification, materials aging, and have permitted us to avoid nuclear testing. The computing initiative that the Secretary mentioned has been a vanguard for what is really almost a new industry in America in high-performance computing. So much of this is the result of the genius, I think, of Vic Reese and the teamwork that he held with the labs and the plants. So I'd like to make sure we all thank Vic for that stupendous foundation we had to work with. But as we moved through 2001, I felt we were well on our way towards delivering a better, more efficient, more effective, more responsive organization. But then came September 11. And I couldn't have been more proud of the way the men and women of NNSA responded to that crisis. And while our mission didn't change that day, the terrorism attacks certainly changed the conversation about NNSA. And concerns about information security changed to concerns about physical security. We responded with immediate steps to strengthen security and launched a series of longer-term improvements to strengthen our security posture. Our emergency response teams and our non-proliferation programs were already performing critical work, but as the nation began to focus more on this terrorism threat, the work of this side of the House grew even more important, and NNSA became fully integrated into the American response to terrorist threats at home and abroad. It seems now to me that NSA is in a pretty good spot. The budget is more than encouraging, and I'm certain it'll be well spent. The political support is at least steady and hopefully growing, and the relationship with the Department of Defense is better than it's ever been. The constant that has flowed through all the challenges and the ups and downs of NNSA really is the quality, the dedication of the team. Some of the faces have changed, but the character and the drive of the people in NNSA hasn't. I urge the leadership, the new leadership, to keep the highest standards of technical competence within the team and to look for more ways to manage the entire enterprise as a national team and not just in a sterile contractor-vendor relationship. One final point, I mentioned earlier about the uncertainties that Tom and I have each faced 10 years apart as the hands that hold the reins of government have changed. The presidents have been different, their policies have been different, but each has been driven by his commitment to protect America, and they have seen fit to do some of their good work through the great people of NNSA. For that, you should be very proud. Thank you.
Our next speaker had a distinguished career in the Navy, and like many others, as I'm learning in NNSA, he was a submariner. He went on to serve on the National Security Council, One of the capstones of his career came when he represented the United States in negotiations with the Russians that led to the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. Ambassador Linton Brooks.
Thanks, Clarence. It's nice to be home. This is the stage in the program where everything has been said, but not everybody has said it. And so, like those who came before me, I have to say how honored I am to be here, to be on the stage with Tom and with John, and particularly to share the stage with Representative Thornberry and the woman I still think of as Chairman Tauscher, who did so much for me and for NNSA, but above all for the country. But mostly, I'm honored to be here with the people of NNSA. I'm different from Tom and John. I didn't get to go through a presidential transition. They had months to think about things. John called me on Tuesday. He said, I'm leaving. I think Spencer's going to ask you to take over. I'm going Friday. Do you think we need to talk? So while John's airplane and changing the engine was fine, I suddenly woke up in coach and found I was supposed to fly. And in the 5 years I got to be with you, I got to see you all do some remarkable things. I got to see you restore tritium production. I got to see you restore pit production. I got to see you begin the restoration of the weapons complex. I got to see you inevitably meet all of your requirements with DOD. I got to see you transform stockpile stewardship into something that we thought might work into something that's the unquestioned basis. I got to see you expand non-proliferation by a factor of 3 or 4 and to invent new approaches like GTRI. I got to see you become major players in the counterterrorism world. I got to see you lay the groundwork for many of the management innovations the Secretary is now bringing to the department in 5-year budgeting, in personnel, in construction management. And I was very proud of you then, and you should be very proud of yourself now, because consistent with your slogan, it is that past that we honor that leads us to the future that we are moving into. But it seems to me on the 10th anniversary, I don't want to just look back and talk about what we did, but I want to remind you of how lucky we were to be allowed to do it. We were lucky in the leadership we had, as Tom is lucky in the leadership that he has now. But we were just plain lucky, because in a world of mundane jobs, you got to deal with important and difficult challenges. In a world where people come to the office and then leave quickly and pay no attention to their coworkers, you got to work with some of the smartest, most dedicated, and occasionally most colorful human beings on the planet. And above all, in a world where people complain about lack of meaning in their work and in their lives, you never had to worry about that. We never had to worry about it, because our efforts did have meaning. We had the privilege of serving something greater than ourselves. We had the privilege of serving the people and the values of the greatest nation in the history of the world. And that's what we should celebrate, and that's what I miss. Keep it up. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Ambassador Brooks and General Gordon at this point to join Tom DiAgostino here at the lectern for a special presentation. And I'd like to ask Mike Cain to join us on the stage, please. Tom?
Well, Linton, I know we didn't coordinate our talking points, but the word is service, and that's a tremendous part of what the NNSA is about. We're a service organization. Many of you remember the phrase by Nathan Hale where he says, "I regret that I only have one life to lose for my country." He said that just before he was being executed in September the 22nd, 1776. 12 days earlier, though, people don't know about what he said. That was just a tremendous statement that he made on the 22nd of September, but he wrote a letter to William Hull, and he said, "Every kind of service necessary for the public good is honorable service." And so when I hear those words, public good, honorable service, I think of Mike Cain. Mike, thanks very much for joining us today. Many of you may not know, but Mike was recently appointed by Secretary Chu to be the Chief Human Capital Officer for the Department of Energy. So after I got over, we're losing somebody tremendous, I realized actually this is a tremendous honor for Mike. It's a recognition by a very exacting and demanding secretary who knows what he wants, and he understands that people form the core of any organization. We've got great facilities, as you heard the secretary talk about. We've got incredible sites that have done things for 60 years for this country. But at the core of it, it's the people in the organization. Mike was a big part of leading that commitment, that idea of service within the NNSA as Associate Administrator for Management Administration. We all remember Mike making sure that in addition to the hard work of pulling together an organization, that we had fun in the process. You may not know, Mike was Santa Claus 8 years in a row, I think. Now, we are desperately thinking about what are we going to do this December. We're taking applications. Bill Barker will have the running list. But in essence, throughout that decade of operations, Mike, in essence, was this face and the driving force behind moving the organization forward from a management standpoint and driving the people together. He was always at our right hand. I'll speak for Linton and John Gordon here that Mike was always there. When something came up, we said, Mike will know how to fix it. You know, it's not like that Life cereal commercial about Mikey. But it was close because he was always there. He could take care of the problem. And I can go on, but I don't want to because in reality, what we're here to do is recognize Mike and give him a small token of our appreciation for the work that he's done. Mike, in essence, embodies Nathan Hale's point that serving the public good is an honorable profession. So, Mike, thank you very much. We'd like to present to you a small token of our appreciation. We'll have to figure out how to do this. Well, why don't we have you in between on this side? And let me read what's on the plaque here. We're confusing the photographer. The plate says, the National Nuclear Security Administration thanks you for your visionary leadership, dedication, and commitment to excellence. Mike, we sincerely thank you for this and appreciate it. I'd love to get a good round of applause for Mike Cain. Thank you. Mike, if I could have you say a few words, and I promise not to drop this. Clarence?
Well, it's an honor and a privilege to be here today. This morning when I came in, I was already thinking about attending some meetings outside the building. And Bill Barker grabbed me in the hallway and said, "You will be there." And I said, "Well, I've got all these meetings to go to." And Barker said, No, you're not listening to me. Please, I'm just trying to make sure you understand. You will be there. And I thought about that for a while, and I think that really is what we're talking about here today. NNSA people, from everything you've heard today, have a series of attributes about them. They feel a sense of responsibility, and they accept that responsibility fully. They feel a sense of urgency, not just for one event, but each and every day. And they come to work with the idea of what they're going to accomplish, and if that world changes on them, the people throughout this complex know how to turn and put their shoulder into it. They know what it means to be committed to something of a higher purpose, to be here for a reason that doesn't just involve them. They know how to have a passion of conviction and yet turn that conviction when the time comes to support or another decision. That, to me, is what makes working in the NNSA something special. We had people sitting up here today, leaders on Capitol Hill, who realized the urgency of the situation and seized the legislative action to help us. We had 3 administrators who came in and accepted that responsibility and all the burdens that went with it, and then took the risk to turn to all of us in all of our diversity and all of our separate missions and all of our separate beliefs and say, get it done. Get the job done. And so what I say to you today is, when you listen to what they talked about, the people of the NNSA got the job done. They're getting the job done every day. I didn't want to disagree with the secretary, but the budget increase is really closer to about 16% the way I want to score it. And that's because of each and every one of you out there. It's because programs executed. It's because things that weren't right got fixed. It's because truth got told. And it's because in your heart you believed in what you were here to do. And there is nothing more admirable than that. There is nothing more admirable than the service to this country. And I am indebted to each one of you for having the opportunity to be part of this team. And in my heart, I will always be part of this team. Thank you.
Our next speaker ably represented the congressional district that includes Lawrence Livermore, and she was a key force in creating and overseeing NNSA. In 2007, she became chair of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Strategic Forces, and last year, President Obama named her Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. Please welcome the Honorable Ellen Tauscher.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clarence. I'm actually glad that Secretary Chu left. You can imagine my chagrin when my congressional staff told me that a Nobel laureate was coming to take me to dinner, the new head of the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. And so we went to the Monocle just off the hill. It was in between votes. And he sat down and proceeded to tell me that the congressional maps were wrong, that Lawrence Berkeley Lab was actually in the 10th Congressional District. And I remember sitting there thinking, he may be a scientist, but he can't read a map. So we came to an agreement to agree that while I didn't directly represent him, that I would certainly work for his interest. But can you imagine, how lucky am I? Here I am, the mother of the NNSA. Mother's Day is just a few days away. I have I have a small problem. There are two fathers. One of them didn't come today, so I don't have to really directly deal with the family picture of Mac on one side and Pete Domenici on the other. But I know a little bit about difficult births. My 19-year-old is a freshman in college now, but she was born at 26 weeks, 4 days, had lung surgery, 11 hip surgeries, and now plays Division I volleyball at Bucknell University. So my children do well. And now that you're 10, I can see how well you're all doing. I got very, very lucky very early in my life. I picked the right parents, was born in New Jersey, got to work on Wall Street, then moved to California, and then one day when I didn't take my medication on time, decided to run for Congress, and found out that I was actually going to represent the smartest people in the world. Not because they elected me 7 times, that's a nice coincidence, but because my district is literally one of the smartest places on the planet. And it's got Travis Air Force Base and lots of people that work in Silicon Valley and lots of people that work in San Francisco and lots of entrepreneurs and many people with advanced degrees. But it is the home of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in Sandia, California. And that is why I have some of the smartest people in the world. Now, the 3 lab directors, I know George isn't here, but Ron Cochran is here, but certainly Tom and Mike all have been my constituents. At one point, all worked in Livermore and lived in the area. So I really believe that I was lucky when I came to Congress. I believe that where you stand is where you sit. So because I represented the 2 laboratories, I thought it was important to launch myself like Velcro girl onto the Armed Services Committee, and I actually did get on the Armed Services Committee, and then worked hard enough and waited long enough and got lucky with an election in 2007 and became the chairman of Strategic Forces. But over that time, I've gotten to meet John Gordon and Ambassador Brooks and work with Tom for a long time and work for many of you. So I've had it doubly blessed, because I not only got to do public service, but I got to do public service working for some of the best public servants in the world. And so I want to say, because everything has been said, I want to say congratulations on the success of your work. Congratulations on your mostly unheralded support and protection of the American people and our values and all of the things that you have done for these many years, the science that you have created, an enormous goodwill that you've created around the world for us. Thank you very much for the honor to do that. Now that I'm in the State Department, I work for Tom. We sit together most days in the White House making decisions, or Dan Poneman, and I still think that the experience that I had both in the Congress working for the 10th Congressional District and as chairman of Strategic Forces gives me the kind of gravitas to talk about the mission of the NNSA and to make sure that you get the things that you need. And I think you see certainly the President's support and Secretary Clinton's support is significant to make sure that we have not only the human capital, but the best infrastructure we can have to keep our weapons and our science the best in the world. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here, and congratulations.
When I interviewed for the position that I have now, I interviewed with a number of you, ladies and gentlemen in the audience. And I interviewed with Tom, and I had never met Tom DeAgostino before. We spent about an hour and a half together in our first meeting, and he did most of the talking. And I was sitting there in Tom's presence, and in my mind, the voice said, "Is this guy really for real?" He's an unbelievable gentleman, as all of you know. And I've worked for been fortunate to work for some wonderful people, but they didn't come across quite that way in my first meeting with them. And so when he finished talking, I said to him, "I have to ask you, is the Tom DeAgostino, who I just talked to for an hour and a half, if I take this position, going to be the same Tom DeAgostino 2 weeks from now at 2:30 in the afternoon when something hasn't been done right, and it's my responsibility? Is that going to be the same guy that I interact with? And in his own special way, he thought about it, and he said, well, I'm a submariner, and I'm a pretty even-keeled guy. But if you want to know what I'm really like at 2:30 on a Wednesday afternoon, ask anybody in this agency you'd like and see what they say to you. And so I did. And I asked as many people as I could. And the answer came back the same. What you see is what you get. Tom DeAgostino is an extraordinary man. He is exactly the type of leader that NNSA needs for these times. And in my short time here, and I'm sure in your longer time here, you have found that to be true. Tom, would you like to make a few remarks, please?
Wow. That only cost me $50. Am I allowed to say thanks, Mom? Really, this is a special day for us, all of us. I think I speak for Linton and for John Gordon, that Ellen, you have just been there for us every single time. We'll have to say, when I heard that you were coming over to the administration, my immediate reaction, our first reaction was, oh, what's going to happen on the Hill? This is not good. But in reality, as things do, they work out. They work out very well. Ellen has just been just an incredible colleague. She understands the NNSA. She understands the people in the organization. She knows what you can do, and she knows that you've delivered. And for that reason, she's been a tremendous champion. Our success is a result of many people, of course, of all of us, but we have to recognize the incredible contributions that Ellen has made. And I'm going to have to ask you to clap again, because I'm going to do it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Your children, thank you. Ambassador Linton Brooks and General John Gordon, thank you both very much for being here. It makes it so special, frankly, to have you here. Your words mean a lot. I miss them. I miss hearing them. And I know I speak for Mike Kane. When we've heard both of you speak over the years, those sound messages of providing the stability and service really run true in this organization. And I'm committed to carrying that on as long as I'm in this position and working with the people in this organization to keep pushing forward this idea of commitment and mission. If Congressman Thornberry was here as one of the fathers, I would say, I would thank him for his work. It's actually been incredible working with him as well. We're honored to have just a tremendous group of special guests. Many of the folks here have held jobs as deputy administrator. I see Bill Ostendorf, my principal deputy. Rose is here, Madeline Creedon, who was the first deputy administrator for defense programs. I could go on, and like others have said, you always risk leaving somebody out. Each and every one of you is special and should take heart and be proud of the accomplishments over the last 10 years. And for the rest of us that will be here for the next, well, I'm not going to say I'm going to be here for 10 years, but for those of you, we have a tremendous amount of work ahead of us. We had a distinguished visitor reception a little earlier in the lobby, and I described how we got to this slogan, honoring our past and securing our future, which I think is exactly the right slogan to have. We held a contest, a lot of ideas came in, we consolidated those, and we voted on the best slogan. And for the last 10 years, this slogan actually embodies both looking back and recognizing tremendous accomplishments, but knowing that our work lies ahead of us. There's a tremendous amount of work that we have ahead of us. Let me just go back just a month, though. In the last few weeks, the work you've done has just been remarkable and has garnered a lot of attention. We've seen the release of the Nuclear Posture Review. As the Secretary said, we've been highly involved in that. It adopts a 21st century approach for dealing with nuclear security. The signing of the New START Treaty, another child of Ellen's, I would say, if you will define the future of our stockpile. And the completion of this historic nuclear security summit really is unprecedented, where we've got these 50 leaders from around the world to agree on an integrated approach towards dealing with the all-important task of securing nuclear materials around the world. And all of this follows the release in February of our program, FY11 program and budget request, 9.8%, 16%. I like the 16% number that Mike Kane came up with. We'll go with that. But the bottom line is this more than $11.4 billion that the President asked for to support nuclear security is a tremendous real example of the administration's commitment to ensuring the national as well as international security that's so important and moving forward on the President's Prague agenda. It shows the confidence that our nation's leadership has in your ability to get the job done. I'm proud of our track record, I really am, over the last decade. Together, we've made great strides in transforming a Cold War nuclear weapons complex and shifting it into a 21st century nuclear security or national security enterprise. Together, we've safely maintained the safety, security, and the reliability of our stockpile without underground testing. Together, we've built the world's fastest supercomputers, the most advanced modeling and simulation codes and capabilities in the world. And as was said earlier, created almost single-handedly this new industry, this idea of simulation science, and how it shapes not just the work we do here, not just national security, but everything. Together, we're working in more than 100 countries to secure vulnerable nuclear material, prevent nuclear smuggling, and strengthen the non-proliferation regime. Together, we've provided the U.S. Navy with safe, reliable nuclear propulsion. Together, we've provided the nation with world-class nuclear counterterrorism and emergency management capabilities. Together, we've safely transported nuclear materials between our sites, traveling over 100 million miles without any single accidents. And together, we have implemented cutting-edge management reform that are improving the way we do business. It's certainly a record we can be proud of. And I'd like to thank you all for your hard work, your interactions with the Hill, with the White House, with the Pentagon, with the Department of Defense, Department of State, the FBI, all of the agencies, many of whom are represented here today, for the work in all of these areas and making all of this happen. The past 10 years show that we are an agency, as Mike Kane had said earlier, that gets the job done. And as we look back on the next decade, we need to make sure that we're working to align ourselves to maximize our ability to get the job done while ensuring we're being effective with the taxpayer dollars. Even though we're getting an increase, well, we have to get it authorized and appropriated first. Can't forget that. Even though we're asking for an increase, we have to also look at the way we do business, and there are clearly some significant efforts underway in that. But getting the job done means really a lot of things for us. It impacts a lot of our areas, and we have a lot of getting the job done work ahead of us. And getting the job done means essentially designing and building the uranium processing facility and the chemistry and metallurgy research replacement building so that we can do the plutonium and uranium work that this nation needs, not just to take care of the stockpile, but to do that whole range of nuclear security work, nuclear counterterrorism, nuclear nonproliferation, nuclear emergency management, nuclear forensics, all of those things together. Getting the job done means performing that all-important life extension work on the W-76 warhead, the B-61 bomb, and the W-78 warhead, making sure that that's done consistent with the principles of the congressionally mandated stockpile management program. Getting the job done means designing and building reactor core for the Ohio-class submarine replacement, and also refueling that prototype reactor to test out that core, as well as train sailors and submarine officers that will be going into harm's way out in the future. Getting the job done means working around the world. Ken Baker's folks in the Non-Proliferation program, securing vulnerable material, working with our sister agencies, and working within our countries, other countries, to making sure that we can work together to secure this material. And getting the job done means continuing to implement and implementing in a more urgent way the management reforms and governance reforms that we need to do. And finally, getting the job done means renewing our commitment to cutting-edge science and technology. If we can do all of those things and more, we can truly say we are honoring our past and securing our future. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Tom. This concludes our formal program, and you're all invited to join us for a reception in the cafeteria. Thank you for your patience this afternoon. It is clear through the patience that you've shown your love and commitment for this agency and for the importance of its mission. Thank you for coming, and good afternoon.